As an agency, in order to remain relevant, you have to constantly make an effort to dedicate some time and some effort to continuous learning, continuous exploration of new technologies.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Eric Jones. I'm here with Chris Crammond, who's a director at the Deepend Group. Chris, it's good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about, the Deepend Group and how you became involved at its very infancy. Tell us a little bit about what makes the agency special and your sort of unique value proposition in the marketplace.
We started Deepend 19 years ago. At the time, the notion of being a digital agency, was an interesting one. There weren't many of us at the time, so you could just call yourself a digital agency and gain a lot of interest. So as a business, one of the challenges is to remain relevant, and to kind of constantly look to change your business model in order to be relevant. That's probably, that in itself has probably given rise to what we call Deepend Group, which is a series of agencies that fall under that Deepend banner. We still have a digital agency component. We have an arm of the business called Nomad, which is a creative technology focused arm. We have split off sort of content creation, social comms and PR into a brand called History Will Be Kind. And most recently, we have an agency which we've started up called Versa, which is entirely focused on voice experience. And finally, adding to that, we have How to Impact, which is an innovation consulting team.
Great. And how does that holding group structure, do you think, deliver superior client results as opposed to, a single company that tries to do everything?
Probably first and foremost is we really don't have a bloated agency model. The notion of having a retained agency is something that not a lot of people are interested in, particularly when it comes to technology. And so the ability to assemble, a purpose-fit team of specialists and work in a more agile and manner is far more attractive to clients and allows us to kind of get up to speed far more quickly.
Right. And that sort of brings us naturally to the whole new business process and pitching. You once said that you felt there should be rules that sort of govern the pitch process. Could you explain a little bit what you meant by that?
It's a very competitive marketplace, and to pitch, in a lot of cases can be seen to be, giving away intellectual property for free. So the pitch process, some agencies will opt out of pitching, and perhaps chase clients that are more interested in engaging with them on their own terms. So depending on the nature of the client, that will determine whether agencies are particularly interested in chasing and pitching for that client.
You've been, involved in the digital space for over 2 decades. How have you seen the sort of needs that clients are asking for in the pitch process evolve over that period of time, and what are they looking for today?
20 years ago, the notion of digital marketing, digital advertising was a novelty, but the level of knowledge within clients was low. And therefore, perhaps the reliance on the agency or the capabilities of the agency was far greater. Over 20 years, and with digital obviously becoming far more ubiquitous, there's a much higher degree of knowledge within clients. And there are, to some degree, there are even dedicated teams within clients. And so the nature of engagement has changed slightly. It can be, some clients, the engagement can be, entirely on a sort of strategic level. So the implementation of an overarching strategy, so the research and the immersion and the implementation of that strategy, but then the maintenance and the ongoing day-to-day marketing operations are maintained within the client.
Yeah, and what would you say is the number one thing that you're asked to do now on behalf of clients?
We had a really interesting client engagement just last week where a client who has a high degree of digital competence within their business they were big enough to admit that despite that being a large company, they're still reasonably blinkered in terms of their approach to marketing. And so the nature of the engagement that they were seeking was really to remove themselves from the kind of closed-minded approach that they have, and to actually, so to take some of their knowledge outside of their business, place it within an agency, and I suppose to ideate or to perhaps innovate against their business model without the constraints of being inside their own business.
You recently did a little bit of restructuring with your teams from a hierarchical approach to an approach that's based more on agile principles from the software world. How does that more collaboration-centric workflow, how do you think that translates into a real benefit for clients?
So we have implemented a series of principles from an American consultancy called Agency Agile. They've been very successful in the agency space about implementing a different model of working. It's largely based around team empowerment. And it means that you are able to, I suppose, to get up and running faster, that everyone feels that like they have ownership of the process. It's not such a linear process, which, strategy is done in isolation from user experience, which is done in isolation from design, which is done in isolation from technology, which delays or prolongs the development process. And it also leads to inconsistencies and perhaps inefficiencies. So kind of a more, holistic, empowered team, all working collaboratively together, achieves a higher degree of velocity and also has a higher degree of communication.
You mentioned the word relevance earlier. How has your culture sort of helped with that effort to, remain relevant and, deliver consistently outstanding results to clients, as evidenced by your many awards? Clients
these days are if not to some degree, can be more informed than agencies when it comes to new technologies, new ways of thinking. And so as an agency, in order to remain relevant, you have to constantly make an effort to dedicate some time and some effort to continuous learning, continuous exploration of new technologies. In order to do that, we've looked at implementing a number of things within the business, both from sort of internal education programs, or on a monthly basis, getting in kind of interesting speakers from a range of industries coming in and talking to us about a range of topics, even down to running our own incubator program within the agency. So dedicating some time and resources to trying to realize a particular idea of people within the agency.
You mentioned your sister agency, Versa, as a voice, as I think Australia's first voice only agency. In the proliferation of all these incredible technologies. Given that, what do you think actually sits at the heart of a brand or a digital experience today?
There is a lot of talk about different forms of artificial intelligence at the moment. Things like chatbots and voice are obviously kind of leading the charge to that degree. What I have found particularly interesting about our work in those sorts of areas is they are far more successful when you apply what I would call a tone of voice to them. So, for example, we worked on a chatbot prototype recently for a department of the state government. We went through a series of iterations. The product itself became people absolutely warmed to the product when it was given a tone of voice. So really simple things like the chatbot itself, when it was repeating the user's name, it was repeating the question back to them, and then it was thanking them at the end of the process. What was quite funny about that was we found in testing people were breaking the chatbot by thanking it back and kind of responding to it in a human way. And if you think about it, you talked about digital experiences and what's at the heart of a good digital experience. Voice is really interesting because it is that tone of voice gives you an opportunity to insert, the values of a brand into a form of artificial intelligence.
We've sort of shifted from this, information first approach to digital, to websites, to content, to, as you said, more personality, more emotion, more entertainment. Are we at the very beginning of that? Is it here to stay? Where do you think we sit with that?
The challenge remains the same. So the marketing challenge remains the same. you need to create an experience that people warm to. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should wrap every experience in a branded piece. Digital gives you the opportunity through data to analyze when is the right time to do that and when is not the right time to do that. So, for example, there is a time and place for utility based on data, and then there is a time and a place for branded experience. But at the same time, if people are looking for utility at a particular point in time, there's no point in delivering that in a heavy-handed branded experience.
Mm-hmm. Are you concerned, with privacy concerns and Cambridge Analytica, and regulation, that digital marketing agencies, brands will lose access to critical data sets? Or do you think there's already enough information out there about people that it's never going to be really a concern?
There are different ways of kind of personalizing digital experiences. And it's a bit like, I liken it to the experience of being in a retail store. There's a very fine line between someone hovering in an annoying way and someone providing a useful service to you as a customer. People will provide certain amounts of information about themselves in order to receive a better experience. They're willing to answer certain questions. And again, the data should tell you when and when not to retarget someone on the basis of previous experience.
What are you most excited about? We talked about AI, we talked about automation, voice, chatbots, things like that. From a technology standpoint, what are you most excited about over the course of the next 3 years?
There was a big rush of excitement with regards to virtual reality or augmented reality, although people they've seemingly pared that back. I still think there are probably some good opportunities out there to create experiences with those sorts of technologies. But it takes a pretty brave brand to experiment with something like that, and I guess to test and learn and implement something to the point of where it's useful.
So that's actually a great point. How much of marketing budgets should be devoted to experimentation and testing and exploration?
I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule about a percentage, but absolutely those that are not experimenting in new technologies and looking at whether they resonate with their customers will fall behind pretty quickly. But again, there are efficient ways to do that. We will, for example, do that through things like hack days. So we'll assemble a number of different teams focused on specific technologies, and we'll run a hack day. So you're constrained in terms of the time, but the goal will be to output something that answers a particular problem for a client within a set period of time. So there are cost-effective ways, but to say, you have to allocate 20% to innovating and testing your brand within new technologies, I'm not sure if there's a hard and fast rule.
What's one thing you wish all potential clients would know before beginning to retain the process of retaining a digital agency?
The most successful collaborations we have with clients are ones where they are completely involved in the process. Nothing is done in isolation. As I said, agencies are moving far more to a kind of consultancy role, where the client almost has a number of team members embedded permanently in a team, and whether that's off-site or whether that's on-site with the client. But when there is kind of constant communication and constant collaboration, I suppose it's a shared journey, particularly with new technology. You can unearth things that no one was aware of in the process of a project. Unless that's done collaboratively, people don't share in that experience and they're not along for the ride.
My last question revolves around a book that you'd like to recommend for our viewers.
So there's a lot of talk in agency circles at the moment about service design, about design thinking principles and how to implement those within an organization. I find that a lot of the books are too theoretical and not practical, but there is a very practical book called This is Service Design Doing. which every chapter is literally a very practical implementation of a particular tenet of service design against a real problem.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
No worries.
That was Chris Crammond, Director at the Deepend Group.